Breaking news. I have just been contacted by the CDC directly telling me that there is a genetic mutation causing CIPA. Well, what is CIPA, you might ask? Congenital insensitivity to pain with anhidrosis. Well, what is anhidrosis, you might ask? Anhidrosis being the inability to sweat. The inability to sweat with the inability to feel pain, these two variants put together is very dangerous. CIPA patients tend to only live to the age of 3. In very rare cases, they will live further. But fortunately enough, only 1 in 25,000 people get this disease. It is a very, very, extremely rare disease. With, unfortunately, only 2 treatments. One of them being very extreme, the other not so extreme. The not so extreme is going to be Narcan. And Narcan is also used on opioid patients who need to get off of that. And Narcan is a 19 carbon, 2 hydrogen, and 4 nitric oxide base. And then the other very extreme treatment is to, when the patient is a baby, pull out all of their baby teeth. And the reason that this is done is because CIPA patients tend to constantly gnaw on their fingers and their tongue. And why is that? Well, that's because they can't feel. This is what a CIPA patient's fingers would look like. And when I mean bite on their fingers, I don't just mean bite, I mean gnaw. There will be a lot of times when they will bite off a finger. And not only will they bite off a finger, there will be a lot of reported cases of CIPA patients biting off their tongue and bleeding to death. But this is what the inside of a mouth of a CIPA patient will look like. And it actually is pretty weird that the patient's mouth would look like that, because the mouth, and as we all know, the tongue is the fastest muscle of the body, fastest healing muscle of the body. So it is very weird that it would look like that, but not too weird, because if you can't feel pain and you are constantly biting, I would assume that there is no time to heal. Like, let's say for instance, I do have CIPA, and I go and I touch the stove with my finger. I'm not going to feel the pain, so I touch it, doesn't burn. So then I don't learn from that. My brain doesn't register, oh, don't do that. So then tomorrow, I still have the burn on my finger, and then tomorrow I leave my finger on there and I'm talking to someone and it's just being burned. And the burn is worse because the original burn hasn't healed yet. And then now the tissues are weakened even more because they're already hurt, and now they're hurt again. And then the next day I do it again and leave it on there for a vast amount of time. In this case, with CIPA patients, this is how it works. They hurt themselves over and over and over, weakening the tissues, giving them no time to heal. So that is how they're hurt all the time, especially because of the fact that they don't know what pain is. They don't know what's going to hurt themselves. Their brain doesn't tell them, oh, that's going to hurt, don't do that. That is exactly how it works. So how does one get CIPA? That's a good question. That is one that we all want to know. Well, it is either genetically mutated or genetically inherited. And genetically mutated, what mutation is genetically mutated? Well, there is one very important gene that is mutated in this mutation. It is called NTRK1, and that is the one that the CDC has called me about. And NTRK1 is found in chromosome 1 in the Q arm, right here. And if we're looking at a full DNA strand, that is going to be found right here in the blue. So NTRK1, that is a neurotrophic receptor neurotrophic receptor triosome kinase. And this has two very important qualities, vitally important. One, it is going to have an encoding for the survival of nerve cells, and the second one, it is going to transmit sensations about sensory neurons. So that is what NTRK1 is important for. And this is going to encode NGF. And NGF is a neurotrophin receptor, and that is a growth receptor. So after NTRK is already mutated, we're going to mutate NGF, our growth receptor. So our sensory neurons are already mutated, our survival of the nerves, our survival of the nerve cells are already mutated, and now we're going to mutate our growth receptor. So after all of these, NGF and NTRK1 are mutated, we're going to bind with TRKA. And TRKA is a tropomyosin receptor kinase. And after all of this binding happens, we're going to keep binding continuously throughout the entire body until the mutation has fully spreaded. And I don't think I mentioned this, NTRK1 is found at the surface of the cells. Being at the surface of the cells, that is a very important part, because how pain works, it is here in the nerves where for example, the dendrites, the nucleus, the synapses, they're all found in the nerves. And then we have NTRK1 being above that. All this mutation is going to be above the nerves. So it's going to cancel out the feeling of feeling. So a CIPA patient can feel touch, sensational feelings. The only thing that they cannot feel is hot, cold, or pain. And the anhidrosis part, not being able to sweat, the very dangerous part about that is, not being able to sweat. We sweat because our body doesn't want us to overheat. So somebody with anhidrosis, when they get too hot or too cold, their body is keeping all these temperatures inside of them. So actually, a lot of people with anhidrosis do end up dying from overheating or hypothermia. Hypothermia is being too cold. A lot of people with CIPA, when they are born, since they have anhidrosis as well along with CIPA, they have febrile seizures. And the febrile seizures do tend to follow them along into adulthood, leading into epilepsy. And since that NTRK1 gene is affecting all of these tissues, every time that this person has a seizure, it is going to majorly affect all of those major tissues. And how does a doctor know if a person has CIPA? Well, when a baby is born initially and stuck with a needle, their first instinct is to cry. So if a baby is born and they get, let's say, a shot, and the doctor is looking at the baby with CIPA and they do not see a reaction at all, the doctor is just going to be thinking, well, that's kind of strange. These are reported doctors saying this. That's kind of strange. And then they're going to do some testing and some screening and maybe see a mutation or a genetic inheritance. And that is where they'll find the NTRK1 or a genetic inheritance. And yeah, I thought it would have been cool to not be able to feel pain. I don't anymore. I hope you learned a little about congenital insensitivity to pain with anhidrosis. Thank you.